All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. Hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to pick up where we left off on the last stream, sort of working through the issues with our new asset system, which, truth be told, there's not a whole lot of issues with that. Just some minor things we have to figure out in regards to the async nature of it all. But we're working our way through those, so we're going to continue that tonight. Hopefully accompanied by a little bit more code removal, actually. So before we get into that, I do just want to take a quick second to thank the supporters of the channel, starting with our elite partner, Javier Olazaran, followed by our partners, Gobolis Inc. and Matt Oscard. Those are the top tiers of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon, followed by all of the supporters you see here listed on the screen. Those are a combination of the other tiers of support over on YouTube memberships, Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. It means a lot, and it is greatly appreciated. It helps me cover the costs of running this channel and the project, things like software licenses, hosting fees, things of that nature. So it definitely helps me out and is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for that. And I would be remiss if I did not mention a big thank you to all of you, the viewers, whether you're catching us live here on the YouTube side or the Twitch side, or if you're just catching the VOD after the fact. Thank you very much for being here. Without you guys, this channel and this project would not exist. So I really much appreciate you guys being here. All right, Sergeant Pepper, since you are first and you actually asked what you won, I give you VIP. Yay. Welcome. It's good to see you, buddy. How are you doing? I always forget that the VIP thing exists. I don't know what it caused that to come to mind just now, but yeah. I think there's like 100 of them you can give out, but I've only given out probably 4 or 5, maybe. If that, even. Spiro is first on the YouTube side. How's it going, buddy? Good to see you as well. I don't know. I don't think there's any sort of VIP over on the YouTube side, though. But you're a mod, so I can't VIP you anyways. But good to see you, Spiro. Third or something, yeah. Actually, I think you're second. But yeah. Let's see. Doing well, fighting with work stuff. Being over web dev, yeah. Do you mean you're over being a web dev? Just over it? I understand that fully. More than you know. Yeah, pretty much. Yep. Yeah, I understand that completely. All right, awesome. So, just as a refresher as to where we were last time, I'm just going to go ahead and rerun via our debugger here. And we can load up the base engine fine. We can open up the console, and that's all well and good. But when we go to load a scene, that's where things break down a little bit. So what we're actually getting here, if we examine the ye old terminal, we're getting some stuff here with the audio system with stale handles. We'll deal with that later. I don't think that's what's causing the crash. In fact, I know it's not what's causing the crash. We have here, cannot get shader for material with an unknown material type. And this, we discovered in the last stream was happening because we are trying to ultimately set up the frequency state for a shader, or I should say a material who we don't actually know, what shader we should even be using, right? So if you take a look at this, we don't actually have proper data being passed through here. So if we actually take a look at our call stack over here, what we have is, let's see, right here with material instance create, right? If we take a look at, let's see, get shader from material type, I'm assuming that material type unknown. So I'm assuming this is probably not returning anything useful. Which is fine, because the reason for that is because we actually were, if I go all the way here, where we are loading up the mesh and then acquiring material instances. We are doing that for a material that we've acquired, right? And we're saying acquire material, material instance creates, and within that, we are trying to actually create a instance for a material that doesn't yet exist. And so we've sort of set up the handle for it, but we don't actually have the asset back yet, right? So we've kind of set up the handle for it and said, hey, go ahead and load and do all this stuff based off of a material that isn't actually configured yet, because we haven't actually received the result of the asynchronous load of the actual material. And so there's two ways that we could solve this. The first way would be we could make the load of the material configuration file synchronous, which would immediately fix the issue and be minimal in terms of code change. Or we could handle it probably what would be considered the right way, and rework the material system to handle asynchronous loading of materials, which requires a little bit more work, but I think it's ultimately probably the correct direction to go. And so that is what we're going to look at doing tonight, is basically just taking a look at our material system and making it work with asynchronous loads. So there are some things that we have to consider when we're doing that. So we'll kind of go over those now. I'm actually going to shut down this application for now. And that way we can actually kind of get going. All right, so Standard Pointer, good to see you. Sergeant Pepper, 20 plus years, time to throw in the towel. Yeah, I understand that. Fully and completely. Especially since web dev is so much more needlessly complicated now than it used to be, and it used to be fairly complicated back in the day. But I think I think I would actually prefer, and this is a bit of a hot take, right? For those of you who know anything about historical web dev versus how it is now, I think I would actually take having to deal with 6 different versions of Internet Explorer and having all the conditional tags and all that crap to have to deal with. I think I would rather take that over the ecosystem that we have now. Any day. I think I would much rather deal with that. It was actually less painful than what we have now. But anyway. Noper2, hello. How's it going? Good to see you as well. Hope you're doing well. Dylan Rayborn over on the YouTube side, thank you very much for the sub. I appreciate that. How long have you been building game engines? So, that's a good question. If I thought about it, it's probably been 15 years, maybe, something like that. Somewhere around there. I've done a lot of them, obviously like hobby engines like this, but I've also done it professionally. So, professionally speaking, let me think. Let me do a little bit of... So my first real exposure to game engine development was back in 2008. Might have even been back as far as 2007. When I was making contributions to the Torque 3D game engine. And I worked with it for several years before then, but I actually started contributing to it back in like 2007, 2008, somewhere. And so there was that. That's kind of where I got started with it. But as far as like making them from scratch, 10, 15 years, somewhere around there, I don't have an exact timetable. I made them... I was in game development professionally for about 5 years. I walked away from that because of work-life balance issues. But yeah, I've been doing it for a number of years. Yep. Torque 3D, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Yeah, exactly. It kind of fell off, right? Unfortunately. But I started messing with that back when it was called V12. Because it was the engine that was originally written by Sierra back in the day. And before that, it was Dynamics, I think, if I remember correctly. And it was used, it was the Tribes engine. Tribes and Tribes 2 was written that engine, built on that engine, I should say. Yeah, so it's been a while. Dating myself a little bit there, I guess, but yeah. All right. So if we go to Material System C, and we take a look at Material System Acquire, this is kind of what kicks off the loading of said materials. So essentially what we do is we do a quick lookup to see if we actually have a material by this name already. If we do, we issue a new instance. If we don't, then we actually go ahead and let's see. So here we actually request a material asset to be loaded. So this portion of it is already sort of happening asynchronously, which is fine. The thing that I'm not sure yet, though, so what we do is we create this handle here, and this material handle that's created essentially reserves something, a space in our internal material array for a new material, and it also sets up an instance, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. No, I think that's done later, actually. My bad. It's been a while since I've looked at this code. It's been maybe a year. So we spin up a new handle for the new material. We go ahead and grab a pointer to it. We kick off an asynchronous asset load, which completes using this callback here. And then we go ahead and we return whether or not the asset actually returns something, right? So if the asset system says, hey, this asset exists and is being processed, or the request for the asset was successful, then we're okay, we're good to go. And so the way that this works is we have this callback here when the material is loaded. However, this out instance has already been set with the handle for the material, which is technically a handle to a material which has not yet been loaded, because this is asynchronous. When this function returns, this doesn't happen to return for at least one update cycle from the job system. So, this is pretty much guaranteed to not be ready to go at this point. And so what's happening is we are doing this, and then I believe, let's see, how are we actually getting, let me double check something. So when we go ahead and drill down through this, here's the material acquisition that's happening here. We go ahead and we create an instance from that. In this case, because it's already found. So that's interesting. So what appears to be the case here, and actually if we look here, we can actually see that the material state is loading, right? So what we're actually running into here is a little bit of a race condition, but it's an easily producible one. I think probably what's happening is we're trying to load the same material twice. So essentially what this means is we are trying to issue a new material instance against a material whose base hasn't actually loaded yet, which makes a lot of sense as to why that's failing, right? And so what we probably need to do is come up with a way to say, when we go ahead and create this instance, let's go ahead and set up the instance, but not actually try to reserve any of the GPU specific stuff that we are going to need for that until the actual material is loaded. And then once the material itself is actually loaded, then we'll say, hey, how many instances of this material do we have that we're sort of waiting on this? Let's loop through those, load them up accordingly, and then continue from there. And then at that point, we should be good. to do this. So I think we're probably going to need to switch up how this instance create works, potentially, to actually handle that properly. So let's actually... this guy. So the way that this works is we create the instance handle, which is fine. This can be done at any time. There's no resources created here. This right here, this bit where we're creating the per draw resources for the shader, this is the bit that would have to wait, right? So what we'll need to do here is, let's see, we'll probably actually have to do, and all of this is actually going to have to wait too, because we won't know actually any of this. So basically everything from here down needs to wait until the instance is actually, or until the base material is actually loaded and ready to go. So we probably ought to have some sort of state on the instances as well, that we can check at this point to say, if the base isn't loaded yet, go ahead and do this, right? Or something along those lines. Thank you for the follows, by the way. Appreciate that. Welcome. How would you recommend someone structure global resources like textures, entities, etc.? So it depends. We actually have a few different ways of doing it in this engine. I'm working towards unifying some of that because this was initially built around sort of a tutorial series where everything was sort of segmented into nice, neat little wrapped up packages. But I'm trying to make everything a little bit more cohesive now. So the way that we handle textures is we actually maintain the textures themselves within a texture cache that is part of the texture system state. So for any sort of resources that we have, we generally have a system that goes with that resource that manages that state. That state is usually some sort of large structure, like this, for example, that contains just a whole bunch of stuff that the system needs to know about. In this case, materials, or in the textures system state, a list of textures, that kind of thing. This state is then owned by an engine state, which has the state for all the various systems. So that engine state is retrievable from anywhere via a static function. So we can always get that engine state and get the state for any system that is required, globally, right? So we can make a call like this where we say we want to acquire. We wouldn't call this one directly, but a function that says hey, we want to acquire a material, for example, or a texture. We always have those states available statically, globally, so that we can always get to them from anywhere. And then as part of that state also, we have an application state. So state for the core engine is maintained sort of in one spot. And then you also have within that a state for the actual application. The application being the code that consumes the engine. Typically, it would be a game. In our case, it's going to be game and or editor. And so we decided to split that out that way so that we have engine-specific stuff, which is sort of agnostic of the game code and all that. That's a little bit generic, if you will. And then we also have the actual application state, which is also obtainable from anywhere. Let's see. One thing I would struggle with is making systems work for any case when I really only need a specific few cases. Then the complexity gets out of control really quickly. Yeah, so that is something you have to consider in your system design, right? And that's actually one thing that we've been guilty of a little bit on this stream, right? Is because I kind of have fallen into the trap in a couple places of, let's just cover this scenario that we might run into, right? To an extent, it's okay to do that, but I've done a lot of code deletion here on the last several streams, and we're going to do some more on this stream. I'm actually more of the mindset these days of I'm only going to code what I need, and if I need something beyond that, then I'll add it. But if I don't need it right away, I'm not going to add it. And that tends to keep the complexity down a little bit. That being said, you do want to try to design things in such a way where if you do need to add something to it, it's not difficult. And keeping things in a more data-oriented way is a easier way to do that. Hope that makes sense. Singy, good to see you over there on the YouTube side. Let's see. Hoping to make this my future career. How is it in the industry? Good question. Awesome. First off, it's a good choice, right? But I'm not gonna lie, it's difficult to get into, right? There's a high barrier to entry because being an engine programmer requires that you know a lot about a lot of different things. That's not to dissuade you, it's just to be honest about it, right? So in terms of the industry, it depends on where you want to wind up in the industry. If you want to work on AAA, that barrier to entry is going to be a little bit higher, right? Not impossible by any stretch of the imagination, but you need to first and foremost learn how to learn on your own. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, but it's one thing that you're going to absolutely need. And this is true for a lot of industries outside of just this, but it's really imperative for something as wide as game engine development. You are going to need to know how to look up how to do stuff on your own and learn how to do stuff on your own. Following tutorials and stuff is a great place to start, but, reading specifications and understanding how to implement those things is going to be where you want to go, is going to be how you want to handle it, right? You don't necessarily want to be hitting Stack Overflow and asking questions every time you run into an issue, or asking ChatGPT every time you run into an issue, right? Critical thinking, problem-solving skills, those are going to be your bread and butter for sure. As far as in the industry, there's engine programmers are needed everywhere, right? Whether somebody's building a proprietary system or they're building on top of Unreal, Unity, whatever, you're still going to need somebody that knows engine programming in general. It depends on what you want to do. Do you want to do the low-level system stuff? Do you want to do the higher-level gameplay code? There's lots of different places, and you could bounce around in the industry too. It really just depends on what you want to do, and you've got to figure that out. But yeah, not impossible, but not easy either. I hope that just about covers that. Psycode, good to see you. The inverse can also happen. You don't generalize enough and end up with a solution that is overly rigid and can't easily expand to a new use case. Not as common, I would say. Yes, I would agree with that. And that's what I'm saying. You have to consider it on some level. But there's a big difference between considering it and writing it that way, right? Like, you don't have to start off with everything being super generic. Just think in a way that it's extendable if you need it. Data-oriented design definitely lends itself well to that, for sure. All right, let's see. Hello, release 0.10. Press M, show string and D array allocated memories are increasing. Not surprised. Although, technically speaking, part of what's happening, if you keep pressing M, right, every time you do that, it is adding to that log, but there's also a console that keeps track of all that stuff. So you're technically creating new strings every single time you do that, because it creates that long formatted string that outputs the memory to the console. That gets added every single time. And there's a D array that actually handles all of that stuff too. So every time you press it, you are adding to it, technically. Because it's not just like written to the console or written to the file and thrown out. It's actually kept in memory because you can actually load here. It's kept in memory because you can actually scroll in this debug console, right? So every time you actually do that, you're adding to this too, which technically increases it. So there may be other issues. I wouldn't be surprised. 0.10 is definitely a dev branch. I'm not done with this branch at all. So we've done a lot of work in this branch too. So yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay, I think the first thing that we probably ought to check here is if material states is material states loaded, then we can do all this stuff, right? We only want to do these things if the material is loaded. Request resources and copy base material properties if the base material is actually loaded and ready to go. Now, what we might need to do, we might need to actually have some way to flag this as not having been loaded in the alternate case, right? So the else case, base material not loaded, handle and callback, an async callback from asset system, right? This is sort of the case where we need to say, we need to mark this particular instance. I guess we could actually probably bump this up as well, because we're going to need that down here. So let's see, is there anything on here that we could use? Material flag, I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to create a Boolean here, right? Unique idea is used for the handle already, so we can't even do that. I suppose we could add another state here. That feels kind of poopy though, but I suppose we could actually do this in the sort of data-oriented way as well, where we have date instances, or so our instances are I don't know that I necessarily want to do that yet either. I think for now I'm just going to plug in. I think I'm going to plug in like an instance state in here. That'll help with debuggability too. So I think, well, I need to rearrange these properties too. These are going to be horribly padded. All right, so for now, let's actually do this. Let's take a copy of this, and we're going to say material instance state, right? So let's do instance state there, and then that, right? So I think once again we'll have uninitialized, loading, and loaded. Let's see, loaded. Does that actually make sense? I guess we could say uninitialize and loaded. I think are the only two states we're actually going to need. We don't really need a loading. Actually, yeah, we should probably have one way to represent that. So uninitialized would essentially mean instance is available, right? Which I actually don't know if we have. Technically, the unique ID is going to provide us with that, but I'm going to be getting rid of that. So I think this state is going to be what we're going to need to use going forward, right? So instance was issued while base material was loading and needs initialization. And then here we'll say instance is ready to be used. Whether that's ready to be used because the base material loaded and then we've initialized it and loaded everything we needed to, or because the base instance was, or the base material was already loaded when we issued it, then we can skip loading and go right to loaded. I think that is going to be what we're going to do. So we'll say material instance state, and then down here, we'll say if this is loaded, right? And actually, let's do this first. So we'll say inst states is material instance state uninitialized, right? Which is technically 0. It's going to be that anyways, but let's just be explicit about it. And then here, we're going to, I guess we could do this. We could say inst state equals material instance loading, right? That'll be the state here. And then after all of this is done, assuming we actually did all of this successfully, we can say material instance state loaded, right? And then what we'll do down here in the alternate case of the base material is not yet loaded, we'll just say that that's loading, right? And then what we can do is we can check any of these, any of the material instances that are marked as loading. We can then go ahead and perform this logic on that. And I think that should be sufficient. I will say, though, this is a synchronous function. Let's see, this could technically return from a different thread. I think what I'm going to want to do is if we actually fail to do this for some reason, I'm going to flip that back to uninitialize. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay. All right, that makes sense. We should probably also, we might actually wind up splitting this out into a separate function, I'm thinking. Because there are actually going to be two places in code where we want to do this bit. So the first place is going to wind up being, let's see. The first place is going to wind up being in our callback. Let's see, we have material creates, and then we have instance creates when the material is loaded. That's probably not the logic that we want to do, actually. That's going to get called twice. Okay, let me put this here for a second. I think I see part of the problem also. So we shouldn't be doing this, right? This would have already been done. Create an instance if one is required. So this would have already been done previously, I believe. No. It only would have been done here. Okay, we do have to do that then, but there's one other step. Okay, so we need to do this, but then we also need to do, iterate the instances of the material and see if any were waiting on the asset to load. Which is where this logic is going to come in to play. So what we're going to want to do is, do we actually have, material handle. I don't think we actually have a pointer to the material yet. So let's grab this and go here. We'll need this in a minute. So base material is going to wind up actually being, let's see, listener inst, instance, no, material handle index, right? So that's the base material. We'll get a pointer to that. And then we want the instance handle. We want we actually need to iterate through the materials instead of getting it via a handle. So material rather state materials. Material, wait, wasn't it instance data? Instances, there we go. So that's going to be how did we actually get, let me see something. So I think, where was that? Material creates, material instance handle creates, I think, yeah, this one. Instance count was state instances material. Okay, this is what I need, essentially this. You know what, let's actually just grab that whole thing. And then go back. Let me find this guy right here. All right, so here are the material instances. This is going to be listener instance, material handle, handle index. That's going to iterate the array of instances. I'm going to take this in here to just get a convenience pointer to that, right? This is going to be, instead of using the, actually, yeah, it's going to be listener instance, material handle, and then that's also going to be sub I, right? So we'll go ahead and get the material instance data, and then we can just check. Let's see, inst, whoops, unique ID. All right, so instead of checking for unique ID and invalid ID U64, what we actually want to check is the state. And we just want to say material instance state loading, right? So any of those instances that are stuck in sort of the loading holding pattern, we want to take all of this logic and execute it, right? Instead of return false here, we're going to do a continue, right? So obviously we get, if we fail that for some reason, we really probably ought to look into that, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. Okay. Are there any, yeah, I think that's it. That might actually solve all of our issues, I think. Hmm? Maybe a fresh build. Okay. Why is STB Vorbis failing to build? It just did a massive update on my system, and I'm wondering if I broke something. Wonder, did Clang 20 do something? Foobar. Shoot. I suppose I could try to override that, right, and just turn off wearer for this guy. Oh, that's kind of lame, though. Let me catch up on chat. Been trying to implement a thread pool that handles task dependencies. Got it to work after a massive amount of work, but thread contention is killing performance. Yeah, I'll bet it is. Yeah, I thought about, I actually started putting something in for job dependencies. And then I gave up because I'm like, how much am I going to need this? And it was one of those things I kind of walked back. If I get to a point where I need it, then I'll probably put it in place. But yeah, I started exploring that too and kind of ran into some of the same issues. Devs are modern day rock stars. Stuff's confusing and hard. It's like learning Chinese. Yeah, but I mean, everything's learnable if you put enough practice into it, right? So they say that to become an expert at something, you need to put in 10,000 hours worth of work, right? Towards that thing. Actively doing that thing. Some of that time obviously spent studying it, but actively doing it is the way to master it, right? And so, that's obviously years worth of work. So the thing I always tell people is, don't look at it and get discouraged. Look at it and say, okay, well, I've got this mountain of stuff that I've got to learn. There's no way around it, right? Because if you try and go around it, it's going to bite you. Just get through it and start on one thing and just keep plowing forward. Make progress all the time, but also stop every once in a while and take a look at the work you did 6 months ago, compare it to the work you're doing now and go, hey, I was a noob back then. I'm better than that now. I've made progress. It's important to look backwards too, not just worry about, oh, there's all this other stuff I don't know. It's like, well, yeah, but also take a look at what you have learned and what you have improved on. Take a look backwards every once in a while. It's great motivation. Also, as Sergeant Pepper so eloquently puts, stop every once in a while and take a shower. Showers are good. Please take a shower. Okay, well, this is kind of poopy. Let's see. So, autological compare. So, how does this always evaluate to false? I have a feeling if I add, like, a no to this, that it's going to bone older versions of Clang. But let's do it for the sake of moving on in the stream, and I will look into that stuff off stream. So let's see, that's going to be in here. And so we'll say, what was this? So I'll just put in here, wno, and then t auto logical compare. Yeah, looks like it will be good. Okay. All right, let's go back. All right, well, that was annoying, but I might roll my Clang version back if that's going to be an issue. Let's load. All right, so... Oh, that's a breakpoint. I was like, why did we stop there? Looks like... Okay. I'm going to disable that breakpoint. Okay, so... Looks like we've got something else going on here. I'm going to actually scroll up through the error log first and make sure we didn't have anything ahead of this that could cause problems. I'd like to just kind of look through this every once in a while. So I don't actually see any problems with this so far. Looks like our textures are coming in correctly. Assuming our item DB loaded correctly with all the UTF-8 characters and all that good stuff. Okay, so it looks like it actually might literally just be... Okay, so we've got an empty duplicate here. We'll have to look and see what that's from. That could be a lot of different things causing that. This one I can ignore. That's the audio issue. I don't care if that's broken right now. We'll come back to it. Invalid texture handle found while trying to update bind descriptor set. Okay, so I have a suspicion about this one. And I think, again, this is probably going to be an issue of a texture that's trying to be used that is not loaded. So there's going to be a few places where we're going to have to actually figure that stuff out. So let's go ahead and... Oh, okay. Well, it pooped itself, but then it waited until like at the end of the frame to actually tell me that. Perfect. If we look here, though, we did actually load our meshes. So we see our meshes loaded, which is good. But it does look indeed like our textures have not actually fully loaded. So that's an asynchronous thing, too, that we've added that I doubt we're actually handling correctly. If I had to guess, I am thinking that the textures that we're referencing in the material are not actually loaded. And thus we are trying to actually use them as part of a material, even though they're not loaded yet, right? So that is basically error applying material. Yep, okay. So error applying material is telling me that too. So while we're trying to apply a material, we were trying to update and bind per frame uniforms of a descriptor set, and then we have an invalid texture handle. So this tells me that more than likely an upload has not happened or not gone to the GPU, which is why we have an invalid handle there. And then everything, all of the rest of this is just fallout from that. So let's see. I think, let's see. Let's go ahead and take a look at our material system, because that is going to be... Oh, I'm already in there. What am I doing? Let's do failed to update. Wait, failed to update bind. Oh, that's going to be the backend. Okay. Material system apply. This is going to be per frame uniforms. So this is going to be a global texture, actually. That's not loading correct. That's interesting. I'll bet that's the skybox then. Okay. So first off, I don't believe we actually have... We have a left off here and some to-dos, so that we might need to investigate. So material system apply is basically applying like the base material properties, right? And so generally that's going to be things that don't vary from one material instance to the next. And this was specifying specifically per frame uniforms. So per frame is like globals, right? So that's probably going to be the skybox. If not something else, right? So I'm guessing it's probably going to be the skybox. So probably what we should do, we have all of these. Let's see. So here's the per frame. So apply per frame. I don't think apply is actually going to be necessarily what I want. I wonder if apply, no, it's not going to be apply instance. It might be in prepare frame. Let me see. Bind frame. Yeah, this is, I think this is going to be where I want. Let's see. Here we go. So we have the shadow texture being bound. Shadow texture should be available pretty much instantly, right? Because there's no upload that has to happen there. So I'm not really worried about that. The radiance texture is something that could be a problem. So this is probably... Unfortunately, the logs don't actually tell me which shader that is, which is problematic. I should probably fix that. So it's either going to be the irradiance texture, or it's going to be the water shader, because that uses a couple of textures as well. That uses the shadow map texture, which is fine, and then it also uses the irradiance texture. Okay, I guess we probably ought to just check the irradiance texture in both places for now. So let's see. I guess probably the thing that we should do if texture, do we have a texture is loaded? We might not actually have a way to check that. Okay, let me put a to-do here, or a fix me actually. Check if the texture is loaded. I'm thinking... Because of all the asynchronous loading that we're doing with textures, I don't think we actually have a way to validate that. Unless we obviously acquire the texture synchronously. But we can acquire it asynchronously, right? And we have all kinds of options to do that. But we don't actually have, like, we can get the width, we can get the height, we can get the dimensions, but we don't actually have a way to say, is this texture actually loaded? So we need that. So KAPI B8 texture is loaded. I'm going to take the K texture T, and we'll go to here, and we'll add in the implementation. So let's actually just grab this for a second. I don't think this is going to have everything that I need in it, but let's say if this is an invalid texture, then we're just going to return false. Right? If we actually do have a valid texture, right? Let's take a look at, let's see. I guess I could look at, what's something I could look at? I think, was it formats? Yeah, formats. I think if formats sub t is equal to k pixel format unknown, right? Then it's considered unloaded or not loaded, right? Because if we're awaiting a texture to be loaded, we don't actually set the pixel format until that is loaded, I believe. I'll have to verify that, but is loaded would basically be it not set to pixel format unknown. So I think what we should be able to do, assuming this works the way that I think it works, we should be able to say if texture is loaded, and then we'll say t, then we can go ahead and, well, actually, let's do a negative check on that, right? Let's say if texture is not loaded, then we'll do t equals, we don't have a way to get the default texture either, do we? I meant to add those. Why don't we just try for now state default IBL cube map, right? I think that makes sense, right? So we're going to do that there, and then I'm also going to put this, I'm going to leave the fix me for there for right now. And I'm going to put this here as well. And I realize we're checking that every single time, and there's going to be a better way to do it, but for now, let's see if that solves the problem. Let's see. A plus B is less than A. Oh, are you talking about the error in STB, the STB library? Yeah. It was kind of ridiculous, but like I didn't want to step into that library and rewrite it because that was written by Sean Barrett and he knows what he's doing. So I didn't really want to mess with it. Nicola, how's it going? Hi there, don't know much about Vulkan, but I see it as an option when I play Dota 2. It's just another rendering API, right? So, you know, it's just another option alongside Direct3D/DirectX or Metal or OpenGL. Grubby programmer write better code. Yeah. Grubby programmers write better code. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah, Sean Barrett's awesome. He definitely knows what the hell he's doing. So I know that when I use his code, it's going to be reliable. Let's see. Does this actually do the thing? Does not. Okay, so I think what I need to do is I probably need to grab this and set a breakpoint so I can see exactly where this is happening. Because I took a slightly educated guess, but that guess seems to have been wrong. So, it's apply per group this time. So we did fix the issue because now it's per group. Okay. So now we're in material system apply. And that has to do a whole bunch of other textures, which I need defaults for if they're not loaded, right? So I feel like there's got to be a better way to do this rather than an if check every single time we apply, right? Because that seems kind of stupid. However, I am going to do it the stupid way to get it working. And then we will think about doing it the non-stupid way, right? So what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to replicate this down in material system apply. And everywhere where we are loading in a texture, we are going to do the same thing, right? So Let's see. So here is a texture, right? So we'll essentially need to do this, and then instead of just T, it's going to be base material, base color texture. And if that is not used, let's see, we need to actually have a way to get default texture, because I don't think we actually have that. I don't think we actually put that. We do have them loaded, but I don't think we can actually access them yet. So I think we need to actually write some accessors. We could get them by name, which maybe is the way to do it. I think texture system initialize does include those names. I think it does actually use those names. Let me double check. Yeah, I think it does. So I guess we could just do it that way, I guess. So we can say, yeah, I'll just do it that way for now instead of making functions for all of that, because that seems just really verbose, right? So I'll do texture acquire, and I can actually do a texture acquire sync for that default texture. Actually, can I? I don't think this checks to see. Get if exists by name, right? So name is options name or image asset name. Let me just double check to make sure this is going to work the way I think it's going to. Yes, because we use the image asset name by that. Yes. Okay. So we can actually use texture acquire sync with these predefined names, right? So we can do this, and then we can do that, and then we'll say texture acquire sync that, right? Do we need a K name for that? I think we do. Let's see. This should also be, instead of passing this directly, we should probably use like T, right? So let's do, oops. Let's do K texture T equals this, right? We'll start off with that. We'll do a K name create here, which is also kind of stupid to do. We should definitely have a way to get these default textures instead of doing this. But we're going to do a hack here instead. This needs to point to a function to get this instead of processing all of this every time. Okay. Because there's multiple things going on here. Right? So we can check to see if the texture is loaded. Fine. That we're going to have to do. But actually, there's two hacks here. I guess we should probably split this up. So let's do another hack here. Right? Because there's really two different things happening here. So ultimately what we're going to want is, and maybe we just use, maybe we find a way to have the texture system actually do this, where when we actually set up, where we actually set up or request a texture, maybe internally it points to the resources used by, the default texture in the meantime, until that texture is actually ready to go, right? But I think for right now, this is probably going to be the way to do it. So instead of this, it's going to just use T. Right? And so we'd essentially want to follow this pattern all the way down. Linux, yes. Yeah, we're on Linux at the moment. Yep. Arch, by the way, which is also the name of my machine. Actually, what was deeply hilarious is actually somebody pointed out to me where somebody was asking for the where they could find the by the way version of Arch because they saw that I had this down here in the bottom of the screen. Somebody sent me a screenshot of that. It was deeply hilarious. I wish I saved it, but yeah, it was pretty funny. Anyway, okay. I feel like there's definitely a better way to do this. And I'm debating whether to do it now or deal with it later. Never seen centered tmux tabs? Yeah, I like it. I think it looks a little bit better. I'm a fan of it. I don't know. It's more aesthetically pleasing to me, I guess you could say. Very advanced, yeah. How are you doing, by the way, Bad Cop? Good to see you. It probably makes my tmux a little bit heavier than it really needs to be, but you know, I am using the by the way version of Arch, apparently. So, you know, what's a guy to do? All right, let's do. God, do I really want to do this pattern? This feels wrong, but I'm not coding by feeling here. So let's just do it, get it working, and then we'll get it right. So this is going to be normal texture, right? And this is going to be normal texture. Or actually, wait a minute. We can actually, instead of doing this, we should just say T, right? Yeah, and then here we'll say default normal texture name, and here we will use T. Yes, that's a little bit better. That feels a little bit less dirty. Only a little bit. Also, we have, let's see, texture set. Oh, we are using the texture set. Okay. Okay, so here we have the MRA texture, which can either use the combined metallic roughness AO texture, or it can use the separate ones, right? So this is the combined, this is the separate ones. And we are still binding. Oh, wait a minute. We have state default texture here. I suppose I could use that. Maybe that's what I should do. Right? We do have... That feels a little bit... That feels a little bit less hacky, right? Maybe we should go ahead and grab all of the default textures. And then we don't have to do... Then we don't have to do this poop. We can actually just set it, right? I kind of like that better. Okay. So let's actually grab this for a second and then go to here is default texture. Oh, see, we already have default texture name. So default cube texture. So we probably ought to just grab. Like all of these, right? And then, let's see, we already have default cube, so we don't need that one. And then I think we can literally just do this. Rename these guys. So I guess we'll say defaults base color texture, defaults spec texture, defaults normal texture, defaults MRA texture. Get rid of these annoying highlights. Defaults water normal texture, and default water du dv texture, right? Then we can just do this all the way up. Cool. Then we can take these guys, go here, and I guess we'll change this to K texture, and then that. Let's see, I think I have, oh, I already have this one in here twice. Okay. All right. Fine. Go there. Good enough. All right. So when we have those, now all I have to do is that. It's a little bit better anyway. So I can eliminate that hack at least. And then, whoops, this one becomes the default normal texture. Used to be a power line addict, but I got better. Yeah, fair enough. I do like it, actually. I got rid of a lot of the power line stuff out of my NeoVim config itself, but like there's still traces of it left, and there's still traces of it left in my Tmux config because I just never fart with it anymore, really. Honestly, on my Mac, it's not even set up at all. I didn't even bother. All right, so texture is loaded. I know I had this hack in here a couple of other spots. Oh no, I was using the default there. Okay, so that's fine. So all we really need to do now is this, which I still don't really want to have to do this every single time. We will come back to this and make that a better solution, but at least for right now, it's something, right? So this is the MRA. So like I said, we have two ways to handle this. So here is the MRA texture, and this is going to be default MRA texture, and that's what's going to be used here. And then even though MRA is being used, we still need to bind something for those. That's fine. Do we actually have... Still have to bind something to MRA. So this is actually going to be default MRA texture there. And then the metallic, roughness, and AO are all going to need defaults as well. Those I don't know that I actually have. Didn't I actually, though? We have base color, specular, normal. Guess I don't have the rest of those though. Although I could have swore that I added them actually in code. Create default textures. Default texture, base color, specular, normal. Okay, those are the ones. MRA texture, so we know we have that one. Cube texture. I don't have defaults for those. Probably should though. All right. I guess what I could do. If this is set and the texture actually isn't loaded, you know what? I actually thought of a better solution off the top of my head. In this case, we could actually just not use the texture at all, right? So we could do... Oh, wait a minute. There's another problem with this I just realized too. Okay, so one of the things that we changed with our sort of refactoring of the way that textures worked is the fact that our textures used to be a pointer to a structure, right? Which makes these types of checks fine, right? Because obviously if it's a null pointer, that's just going to evaluate to false. However, technically speaking, when we're loading these things up, we should be checking against invalid K texture, which is not 0, right? It's invalid ID U16, which in this case is 65,535, right? So that's actually another bug that I just realized was there, and probably causing problems. So we're going to have to actually do that in a few places too. So I guess what we could do, texture is loaded, does this same check, right? Texture is loaded right here, does that check, and it says if it's invalid texture, it's going to return false. So technically what we could do is actually just rely on the texture is loaded check for this in general. So instead of actually doing this, right, which would be the normal way to do it if we weren't also checking to see if it was loaded, is we could actually just do texture is loaded here, right? And that's going to return false if the texture handle is invalid or if the texture is not loaded. And then we actually don't need this either, because what we can say is we can just treat that as if the as if there's no texture set, right? So what we can do there is instead of setting the flag to say we're using a base color texture, we're just going to use the base color, right? And set that instead. So instead of actually, continuing to try and use a texture here, we'll just use the base color, right? Which is a uniform that we could set. And a lot of our textures work the same way. So what this does by default is it just falls back to the default texture anyways, which we already kind of had to check for. So we can actually simplify this a lot. This here is saying if we're even using the normal map to begin with, then we check to see if the normal texture exists. Now we can just say texture is loaded. And then we don't actually need material text normal texture, right? So we can revert that back to how it was, get rid of the hack, and then fall this back to default normal texture, right? So we can kind of use the same setup that we already had, which actually that gets set no matter. So that gets set whether this is false or if it's not loaded. Do we actually need... We could probably clean that up a little bit too. Hamlet RPG, how's it going? Good to see you. Do you control in what order textures are rendered? Or somehow Vulkan handles that for you? What do you mean the order that textures are rendered? What do you mean by that? I like it too, but these days I use giant text so it takes up too much space. Yeah, I mean, I find that these fonts just keep getting bigger and bigger too, especially like for stream so that you guys can actually read it. Because like ordinarily I'd probably use, you know, something that's a lot smaller than that. But, you know, like I used to use font sizes like that, right? But like that's just not something that you guys can read, right? So I usually go, I think that's where I had it. I usually go with something like that, which is enough because I've got a 4K screen here that's 28 inches. So it's big enough that my blind ass can read it. Let's see. I almost got Arch installed. Well, I got it. I got and wanted to install a desktop environment, but I ran into some problems with the mirrors, and they were too complex to update, so I gave up. Nowadays, you can just use the Arch install script, right? Yeah, I mean, the Arch install script allows you to like literally configure what you want to use, and then it just does the thing. So if you're, I mean, if you're gonna install it and you're not familiar with it, these days that's the way to do it, and then just look up issues that you run into on the Arch wiki. It's usually the way to do it this day and age. Let's see. Probably this is done more in 2D engines where some texture are rendered on top of the other based on some sort of axis like Y sorting. Just remember Kohi's 3D, so you may not be worried about... Oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, so you're talking about like so you're talking about like when you're rendering a bunch of 2D sprites, right? The order that those get drawn in, like, you know, what gets drawn in front of what. So generally speaking, if you're not using some sort of depth buffer, which you a lot of times won't if you're doing 2D, then any graphics API will always draw them in the order on screen that you draw, right? So to explain it a little bit better, if you draw sprite A first and then draw sprite B overlapping with it, sprite B is going to appear on top because you drew it later. So it's not quite Z order, right? That's something a little bit different. So any graphics API is always going to draw them in the order that you draw it back to front, right? So it'll draw A and then it'll draw B. Now, if you were to draw B first and then draw A, you know, kind of slightly overlapping between the two of them, then A will appear on the top. And that's true whether you're dealing with, you know, OpenGL, Vulkan, Direct3D, any of them, right? And that's if you're not using any sort of depth buffer. That's just the way that it's going to work. If you are using a depth buffer, then you're also going to have to use three-dimensional coordinates, not just X, Y, but also Z. And that relies on a couple of different things. You know, the handedness of your coordinate system. You've got to set up your transformation matrices in order to get one to appear further back in space than the other. And, you know, there's all kinds of things going on there. So the way that a lot of applications manage it is a lot of applications will, they do implement something called Z order. And what they'll do is that Z order will essentially be the order that it ultimately gets drawn on the GPU. So generally speaking, there's not any actual Z access whatsoever, and it doesn't make a difference if there is, if you're not using a depth buffer. It literally matters what order you actually draw it in. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Does Vulkan mean anything significant in other languages? My language, it is literal spelling of volcano. So whenever I have to Google it, something to do with Vulkan, I get like 50-50 between API and factoids about volcanoes. That's hilarious. What language is that, by the way? Yeah, I honestly don't know. That's a good question. Swedish? Yeah, I don't know what the etymology of the name is. I don't recall where it actually came from. But yeah, that's actually pretty funny. Maybe that was intentional. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well, and I mean, depending on how you use Vulkan, it could turn your graphics card into a volcano for sure. Maybe Star Trek nerds. I thought about that side code, but I'm like, would they have really been so bold? To go where no other man has gone before and name something directly after a reference like that, like for an open source. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I did think about that, but yeah, I don't know if that's it. It might be. I'd have to Google it. Sounds like a nice name for Unreal Engine, where any game makes your GPU turn into fire. Yeah, exactly. Yep. If you use Vulkan wrong, it'll turn your GPU into a volcano for sure. All right, so yeah, I think this is going to be the way that we do this. Let's see. The only difference, though, if the flag... Oh, this is actually wrong. Oh, that's neat. Okay, well, let's do this. Let's actually take this now. Let's simplify this a little bit further. Right, we're going to take this and say or. Right, so if the flag is set, and, I want and there, not or. If the flag is set to use the normal map, or normals in general, and the texture is loaded for that, then we're going to go ahead and do this, right? Otherwise, right, so we'll use the provided normal texture, right? If it's enabled and supposed to be used. If it's not, then, how did I intend that to actually work? Because if we're not using normals, we should probably use the default normal, right? Because the shader still expects it. That's why I had it separate. That's why I had it separated. But this is actually still wrong. This should have been down here. Right? So the way that this should work is if normals are enabled. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's not correct. This should be here. So if normals are enabled, I had to think about this for a second. We either use the normal texture or we use the normal that is provided in the base material, right? If it is not set, then what we should probably do is we probably still need to have that set, but we should probably default it too. Let's see, that's going to be, default normal is going to be Z up for default normal. So we need vec3 up. by default. So they are slightly different cases. Okay. Okay, I think that makes sense. There's not a whole bunch of places where we have to do that, but all right. So MRA enabled is the next thing. So if we have that enabled, then we're going to go ahead and use or check the texture, right? So we want to check to see if the texture is loaded. Texture is loaded, right? So we check that. This is going to be base material MRA texture there. We can get rid of this, right? So if we are actually, if we have, if MRA is enabled, meaning use the combined material, or sorry, metalness, roughness, and AO map, then we check to see if a texture is loaded for that. If it is, use it. If it's not loaded, then we need to use the default MRA texture, right? However, if it's, if our MRA is, let me think about this. So if the texture is loaded, okay, so otherwise we can use the base MRA. I think that's fine for now. And then even though MRA is used, we still need to bind something for these other ones. We can use the default texture because they won't be sampled in the shader. That is fine. Okay. We still have to bind something to the MRA texture. It won't get used if MRA is not enabled. However, we will have the metallic texture to contend with. So this is going to be texture is loaded. Right, and I'm actually just going to skip down here real quick and just repeat this operation a couple times. Right, and then go up here and just add a couple of these guys. Here. Okay. So the metallic texture, if that's loaded, use it. Otherwise, use the metallic value set and use a default texture, which we don't actually have a default metallic texture, so that'll have to work. Same goes for roughness, same goes for AO. The only difference would be is if we're not using AO. That should probably use a default value then, if we're not actually using that. So that actually needs to be split out. So let's take this. This should be an if here. I didn't 100% get this right, apparently, when I was looking at it before. So let's get rid of that. All right, so if we are using it, then we need to check and see if the texture is loaded. If the texture is loaded, use it. If it's not loaded, use the base AO. If we are not using it, then we should probably shove something into there anyways, because they still need to be set. But the default for that is going to be one, right? Okay, emissive texture, same thing is going to be true here, actually. Did I, unless I defaulted this into the shader, and I can't remember if I did. But I should probably cover it in both cases, right? Let's go ahead and say if right, we'll cover that case. And then this is going to be, instead of base material, emissive texture, we're going to say texture is loaded. Right, and then use that. Why is this bleating? Oh, because we did not have that. That is why. There we go. Okay, so we do that. Otherwise, we will do emissive equals 0. Oh, does that need to be a vector for? Probably does. All right. Vec for 0. Ah. Okay. So that fixes that. And I think we're going to have to follow the same pattern for the water textures, which is not a huge deal. There's not that many of them. However, in this case, these are all renderable textures, right? So they're handled a little bit differently, at least these three. And then we need the DUDV texture and we need the normal texture. We do have a default water normal texture that we can fall back on. Okay, so instead of fatal layering this, we should probably go ahead and fix that too. So this is going to be texture is loaded. And I'm just going to repeat that all the way down. Right? And then let's just do this and just add these all the way down. All right, and if this is not loaded, instead of fatal layering this, actually no, these are fatal errors. We do need, okay, so for these ones, we do need a reflection texture, refraction texture, and a refraction depth texture. If those aren't loaded, we are screwed. However, for these ones, DUDV and normal textures, that's not necessarily the case. So what we could do is, what we'll do is this. What we'll say is k texture t equals this, right? And I'm just going to scope this off so that we can reuse t, right? And I'll say that's DUDV texture, and then we'll just check t, right? And we'll set t here, t, right? We're going to move this down here, and then what we'll do is if texture is not loaded, then we'll say t equals state default water DUDV texture, right? And we'll remove that, right? Just to kind of simplify that a little bit. And then we can actually just essentially repeat the same thing here. In fact, I'm just going to do, let's see, normal texture. This is going to be the water normal texture, which is actually different, right? So we'll say base material normal texture, right? Which water materials do point to. And then this is going to be default water normal texture here. We do need to scope this. All right, we'll move this here, change this to T, get rid of this, and there we have it. All right, I think that's all the places that we're applying textures, I believe. Skelos Music, good to see you. How are you? We're using plus Y up, or you're a criminal and is plus Z up. We're using plus Y up. I wouldn't do plus Z up, or I wouldn't do Z up at all. I used to think that way, but not anymore. Z up only makes sense if you're like talking about like desktop stuff, like working on the surface of of a desk versus a screen that's kind of already facing you. So, doing well. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Let's see. Question is, what font are you using for the editor? I think it's the Meslo Nerd font. I think. Meslo LGS NF is the name of the font. So it's the Meslo LGS font, but it's the Nerd font. So I have the Nerd font. I have the Nerd font installed so that I get all of these little symbols over here on my browser. That's pretty much it. Yep. Gave up on Envy Chad, spent a weekend learning how to actually set up NeoVim myself. Yeah, it's worth it once you get used to it, I think. Go.devs in shambles. What is Go.use actually? I don't remember. Zed is up in Go. Isn't Zed up also in Unreal? I think. Because I think I saw a tweet from Tim Sweeney the other day saying that he was actually going to switch it. I think. What was it? Yeah, here it is. Unreal Engine is moving to left, up, forward coordinates. So yeah, Unreal is changing it. I think because I'm pretty sure Unreal was in the... Yeah, they are set up. This actually has, and this was created by Freya Homer, which I think, she's pretty knowledgeable with this stuff. That says this is Y up. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can change it though. Went the other way around, used my own NeoVim config for about a year, and then started using LazyVim. Yeah, I prefer just rolling my own config these days. Honestly, I don't touch my config very often, and when I do, it's super minor these days. I haven't really had to do anything major on my config in like 2 years. You're right, Y is up, I'm drunk. Yeah. But yeah, I happened to see this. When did he post this? Like the other day, I think. Does that actually say when he posted it? I don't know. I don't know. Oh yeah, June 5th. Yeah, so that was last week. All right. Did we build? I don't remember. All right. Let me try running this real quick. I suspect we're going to have more issues with this, but... because there's a couple things I can think of off the top of my head that I don't think have been handled. Yeah, so we still have invalid something, but if you look, what we've actually done is working, right? So we've actually got the default texture in there. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's like tiny checkerboard. Let me relaunch this actually. And I actually don't know, is blowing it up going to work? Let's see. Yeah, so now you can actually see it a little bit better. You can see the checkerboard default texture that we have in there. So something else is failing. Per group, let's see. What are we trying to do? Material system apply. I don't know which one it's failing on though. So if we take a look here, the resource handle is indeed invalid. Yep. And it's got an invalid, okay, so it's an invalid handle, which means somewhere in here, let's see, somewhere in here, one of these textures is not right. And I have no idea which one it actually is, which is cool. So I guess what we probably ought to do is, I suppose we could put a breakpoint on textures loaded. It's false, right? But I feel like we're going to hit that a lot when we're first loading up. So I don't know that that's necessarily the way that we should do it. Okay. I think we're going to have to debug that probably on the next stream because I'm just about out of time for tonight, actually. Z is depth. Oh, right. Yeah, right-handed Z up, then plus Y is depth. Right-handed Y up, negative Z is depth, right? Which is what, that one's pretty common, right? Everyone just picked the same damn thing. Yeah, and I think that was part of the point of Tim Sweeney's post here on X, is he was saying that, you know, a lot of the 3D tools and stuff are basically kind of leaning towards this way as well. You know, like GLTF uses that by default. Maya, Houdini, I guess a lot of these guys are actually kind of leaning that way, right? And I used to be a ZUp proponent way back in the day because I was using 3ds Max as my editor, right? And I know Blender is still kind of this way as well. But I mean, really converting from one to the other as far as like your modeler goes is not that big of a deal on the way out. Completely fine once you understand how it works, but if you're starting out, it does bend your brain. Yes, it definitely does. Yep. And I definitely had a few functions in my math library for a while that were using the wrong handedness, which can screw you up, but I did fix that. All right. So I think this is probably where I'm going to leave it tonight. Just because, like I said, I'm about out of time tonight, and you know, we made some pretty good progress. It is actually kind of running. I think we've probably just missed one of these shaders not being loaded correctly, so or one of the textures not being loaded incorrectly. So we'll fix that, and we'll get things back up and running. Hopefully sooner rather than later, so that we can move on to the next thing. We're really close though. Let me answer a couple more chats. Let's see. How long have you worked on this project? So the game engine itself, technically as far as calendar time goes, it's been under construction for about a little over 4 years at this point. But that's calendar years, right? That's not actual time worked on it. Because the actual amount of time that I've worked on it has been like far less than part-time hours per week, right? Plus, you know, I stream a lot of it. It started off as a tutorial series, and there was a lot of time spent editing videos and all that kind of stuff on YouTube. So, you know, there was a lot of time lost there as well. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. Let's see. When I play with release 0.10 testbed, I move the camera tree next to the sponza. I found the transparent part of the leaf texture shows the wall of the sponza instead of the water reflection of the wall. Yes. So that is an issue due to the way that our render graph handles water currently. Because there's an issue there where things aren't quite being sorted correctly between transparent objects in the water plane. Yeah. So yeah, there is a couple of known issues around that for sure. Something we will be solving. We're using kind of an old school way of handling transparency for now. So we eventually I want to get order independent transparency, but for now we don't have it. So yeah, there's lots of little things that you're going to find in there still, and we're going to resolve those as we get further into the game development cycle. But yeah. All right, let me go ahead and find somebody to raid. Let me see. Who all is online? Let me see if I can find somebody relatively quick. Let's see. All right. I know who we're gonna raid. I don't think I can't remember the last time I was able to actually raid him, but we are gonna raid Reinart. So he is making a game. He's actually doing all the artwork himself too, but he's making a game using a custom game engine himself, written from scratch in C++. So we're gonna go over and check him out and see what he's up to. Looks like he's working on a little bit of artwork right now, but he kind of bounces back and forth between that and programming a lot. So we're going to go check that out. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here and hanging out. If you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate a follow either on the Twitch side or the YouTube side, or if you're so inclined, both. That follow helps me, increase my reach and motivate more people, hopefully, to want to get into this space. So, yeah, I really appreciate that. Appreciate you guys being here, and we will be back tomorrow night to continue with this. So I will see you guys then. Have a good one. See ya.